Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. This is one of Wild Apricot's monthly expert webinars, and today we're honored to have Larry Johnson on with us this afternoon. And Larry is one of the world's most sought-after experts on fundraising and the author of the award-winning book, The 8 Principles of Sustainable Fundraising. And for anyone who's ever been anxious about fundraising, many people will attest to Larry's advice being the perfect antidote to that. So I'm really glad that we're able to have him join us today to share his expertise and his experience. And we'll bring Larry on very shortly. In the meantime, I want to introduce myself. That's me on the left of your screen, Donald Cowper, and I'm on the Wild Apricot content team. Beside me on the right of your screen is my colleague, Jason Wiseman, and Jason will be on chat to help you with any technical issues you might have. And during the webinar, please feel free to ask any questions to us or to Larry. And to do that, you can use the chat box. And I want to make a couple of quick reminders before moving on. First, I want to let you know that we are recording this session and we'll be sending you an email with a link to the recording within the next couple of days, so watch out for that. I also want to let you know that by attending today, you are eligible to earn 1 CAE credit. Okay, so we'll get going in just another couple of minutes, but let me briefly say that today's webinar is being brought to you by Wild Apricot. I know that many of our customers are on with us today, so I want to send a big welcome to all of you, but I also know that we have many people here who aren't familiar with Wild Apricot, and I give you a big warm welcome as well. Thank you for joining us. And for those of you who don't know, Wild Apricot is membership management software. It's actually an all-in-one solution for anyone running a membership organization. That's because you can manage your member and contact database, you can run your events, build your website, process all your payments, and so on. And many of our customers consider it a lifesaver because it saves them hours a day in administrative tasks, freeing them up to focus on fulfilling their organization's mission. And we're quite thrilled with what many of our clients have been able to accomplish over the years. We've watched them grow since we started 10 years ago, and they've watched us grow too. And thanks to our customers, we've been ranked, as you see there on your screen, as the #1 rated membership management software solution on the market. And we've been rated that way for the last 5 years. We're very proud of that. Fact that we can help people with great software, but we're also a leading provider of free educational content, which you can find on our blog and in webinars like today's. And if any of you do have questions about Wild Apricot, we're happy to answer them at the end of the webinar. So you're all free to stick around with us after the hour if you happen to have questions and the time to do that. So now, let me introduce today's presenter. As I mentioned earlier, Larry, who you see on the screen there, is the author of the award-winning book, The 8 Principles of Sustainable Fundraising, and Jason is going to put a link in the chat there where you can get the book. I, personally recommend the book, and I know it's a very, very well-loved book, so I encourage you all to check it out. And so by now you know that Larry is a world-renowned expert on fundraising. In fact, the Wall Street Business Network ranks him in the top 15 fundraising consultants in the U.S. He was also named Outstanding Development Executive in 2010 by the Association of Fundraising Professionals. On top of these achievements, Larry is the founder of the 8 Principles, and Larry will tell you a little bit more about that, but for now, let me say that the 8 Principles provides digital fundraising education, live workshops, and structured coaching to nonprofit organizations everywhere, and it's an absolutely superb resource, and I'm sure we'll answer any and all questions you might have about fundraising. So now, I'm going to pass over the presentation to Larry. So Larry, big warm welcome. Thank you so very much for joining us today. I'm really excited about having you here. So I'll pass over the presentation to you right now.
Thank you, Donald. We're going to see if the technology cooperates here. I don't work all the time. See if we can get this to do work. There we go. Today's presentation is entitled Leadership Showing the Way, and that's maybe a little bit of a different title than was promoted to you, but believe me, it's going to make sense in a little bit, so don't worry, we're going to get there. But I don't work all the time. I feel I'm pretty well-rounded, and one thing I love to do, since I live in the Rocky Mountains, is I love to whitewater raft. And what you're seeing there is a trip from last year's 6-day wilderness trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon. It's a glorious trip. Me and some colleagues do this every other year. It is 6 days in the wilderness. You're completely cut off, and about 20 of you go in a group. There's 7 guides. It's really a magnificent experience. Class 4, Class 5 every day. I also enjoy riding my motorcycle. When I moved out west, I bought a Harley Davidson. That's a fat boy. That picture was taken just south of the Montana border into Idaho. A buddy and I, we take road trips, and it's a great way to get out and see the country and just clear your mind on this. And then my wife and I also have trail horses, and we ride them. Those aren't our horses, but but we have our own. And this is up in a wilderness in Montana, and we enjoy that as well. And my wife's the horsewoman, and I learned, and to me it was quite the accomplishment when she told my sister-in-law, well, I no longer have to worry about him falling off. So that was a good thing. That's a very good thing. And a little bit of a trivia for you. Actually, the morbidity rate of riding a horse is 20 times that of riding a motorcycle. And that was quite a revelation to me when I did that research. So that's me. I'm also at home reading my book in a treehouse sometime here. So it's not all work. Let me just tell you first that it's important that I have your undivided attention for the next 20 to 25 minutes. We're going to open it up to questions after then, but between now and then, I really want your undivided attention. And the reason why is that I'm going to share some things with you that are very, very fundamental to your success. And although on the surface they may appear simple, and they aren't complicated, that's true, they are profound, and it requires you listening very carefully and completely if you want to get the benefit from today's session. So I want to know out there right now, and let's fess up, let's put it in the chat box, how many people are multitasking? They're on their phone, they're looking at paper, they're on the email. Okay, let's see it. Let's say yes or no. Let's put it in the chat box. Okay, no one's typing. Well, then I think you're busted. There you go. So I hope this is, there you go. Here we go. I see them. I'm looking in the wrong box. All right, good. All right, excellent. This is like I was looking at the bottom. Well, some of you are, some of you aren't. That's good. Well, that's good. Not anymore. I like that one. All right, so let's keep it that way, because I can guarantee you that you can change your outcome. Let me get this done here. You can change your outcome by changing your mind. I use a trainer. I want to stave off the old man. I'm trying to keep young, and so the trainer, it's more focused on your mind than it is really anything else, and that's what I want to share with you, because the mindset must always be in the right place before you can really accomplish what you want to accomplish. And if you put yourself in the right mindset, I assure you that this thing isn't working. Oh, there we go. It's slow. That you can achieve some great fundraising results. How many would like their fundraising revenue to look like that, their curve? Let's just type some. There we go. All right, great, terrific. All right. Well, I can tell you right now that if you focus on the right things, you will get the results you're looking for. One of the things I do out west also is I shoot skeet. And the key is to aim your target, aim your gun to the right position of the target. And it's not necessarily where you think it is. You're not really pointing at the clay pigeon as it flies by. You're trying to anticipate where it's going to be in the arc after the machine shoots it and into the air, and you're trying to do that. So that's really what we're talking about today. It's a tracking system. It's not a direct aiming system. Now, let's get one thing I do want to talk about, and this addresses directly what you began with. When most people start a project, they start with process, what you do. I mean, that's a long track down that picture there. It's a long journey. So we better start doing stuff. Well, I'm going to suggest to you that's not where you need to start. It's the commonplace. It's the place we think of. It's reflexive. Let's start doing stuff. I'm going to suggest to you that is not what you need to be doing. All right, let's take one step back from process. Well, then we all have a mental paradigm of how we're approaching things. It may not even be conscious to us, but it is a paradigm that we've adopted. So we need to understand what that is, because that will influence our process or our choice of process. But even this isn't far back enough, because there's something else that's operating that is completely independent of us, that will always be operating whether we are aware of them or not. And that, of course, are principles. I'm going to suggest to you there are underlying, ongoing, absolute 100% always operating principles that govern philanthropy and fundraising. And they're operating right now, whether you know them or whether you don't. And I can assure you that the organizations that are operating within those principles, whether or not they even know they are the ones that are successful or wildly successful, like wild apricot. Sorry for the bad pun, Donald. All right. So, and I can assure you that if you don't know what these are, the chances of working all within them are pretty small. So it's best to know what these are, and these are the 8 principles that we've talked about. So today, I want to say one other thing too. This happened to me. I was doing one of these sessions about 2 weeks ago, and a lady on the session said, well, I'm not sure that the principles can apply to my small organization. Well, they already are applying, because they're already there. It's like gravity. It's always there. They're always acting. These are things that just don't change. And that's why it's so important to know what they are, because once you know what the principles are, you can shape a paradigm of your organization or your cause that is within those principles, but also in faith to your organization. And then choosing the process, the actual things you do, becomes very, very easy. And by the way, it's this sequence here that, if you observe it, will remove virtually all the fundraising anxiety. And yes, that includes going out and asking for money. I guarantee you. So let's get started. In 20 minutes, I can't possibly go through every single principle. So we're going to take one of them today that I think will going to take one and kind of explore it a little bit. This is principle 3, and it's leadership leads. And leadership leads, when we think of leadership in a nonprofit organization, we usually think of the governing board, although it is larger than that. You can senior staff, senior volunteers. Let me suggest that leadership is anyone who is visible, and because it will be observed, they will be watched. But in terms of what leadership does, there are really only 3 things that leadership should be concerned about in a nonprofit organization. The first one is setting an example. And we're going to talk about how that works in fundraising in a little bit. But people are watching. Your supporters, your potential supporters are watching, and they will follow your lead wherever that is. The next thing is leadership needs to be focused on provision of resources, and that would include financial resources, human resources, these kinds of things that are essential to fulfilling the mission that you've chosen for your organization. And thirdly, there needs to be insight or expertise. And this is the reason why your leadership boards and other organizations need to be made up of a group of people that represent different professional or expert acumens, so that you have all the things you need at the table. That's why you don't have all bankers, you don't have all accountants, you don't have all social workers, or all PR people, because you need a lot of these different skills brought to the table to make it successful. So what happens if you're missing any of these three? Well, let's take example, for instance. Let's say that you're not setting the right example by your leadership. Well, then in the community in which you operate, you don't have any trust. People can't rely on you for whatever reason. They don't sense you moving them in the right direction. What if you don't have sufficient provision? Well, that's easy. You just have insufficient. You're always going hungry. You're wondering why things aren't properly funded. And then what if you don't have the right insight or the right skills? This is when you become dead in the water. You're absolutely directionless. There's no course, no real understanding. So let's translate this now into a board setting, a formal board setting. There again, there are three things that nonprofit boards must be focused on if the organization is to be successful and they're to be functioning properly. First one, of course, is they need to be focused on setting policy. And this is something that I think small organizations especially struggle with, because they have a very small group of people they're working with. They don't have just scores of individuals they can choose from. And oftentimes board members are called upon to sweep the floor or carry garbage or do any number of mundane tasks. And that's okay. But I think it's very incumbent on board members to remember when they're acting as a board and when they're simply acting as volunteers. And that takes discipline to do that, because the board should only be focused on policy. They shouldn't be, quote, meddling or trying to help, quote unquote, in operations. This is the job of any other volunteers or paid staff, the executive director. Their role is to provide the environment in which these people can do their jobs effectively. The next thing that boards must be focused on is advocacy. If the board members need to be able to tell everyone they know, hey, this is a great organization and I really believe in its mission, and here's why it's so good, and here's why it's so important, and here's the good work it's done. It's good. This is very, very important. Principle 5 of the 8 principles is work from the inside out. And so they must be willing to tap their networks to tell people, hey, this is a great thing. And of course, the last thing, of course, is providing sufficient resources. And of course, those are human resources, but ultimately it does come down to financial resources. And nonprofits have different revenue streams. They may have fee for service. They may have some sort of public subsidy. They may have ancillary business income. But most nonprofits depend somewhat or a great deal on philanthropy. And this is what we're talking about today, and the role that the board places in philanthropy. This is why the board must be involved in the fundraising experience. But fundraising is more than simply asking. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So let's do the reverse question here. What happens in a nonprofit if the board isn't setting policy properly? Well, this is where you get, mission drift, things moving off course, things not really staying focused. And what if no one's out there really advocating for you? There's no cheerleaders, there's no enthusiasm, there's no passion. Well, the community often has this kind of response. Oh, ho hum, it's them again. Okay. And you see, this has become more and more critical in the digital age because there is so much noise out there. It is incredible. Everyone now has a bully pulpit. Everyone now has a platform, which makes getting your message to the right people in some ways easier, but in other ways much more difficult. And this is why you need that strong advocacy of your leaders that build those relationships. A brand is not printed collateral. It's not, fancy websites. It's not any of that sort of thing. The brand is nothing more and nothing less than the mental position you hold in the minds of your supporters and would-be supporters. That's what a brand is. Now, and then lastly, what happens if you don't have resources? Well, you end up, with peanuts. I meet a lot of nonprofits that are what I call still broke and still complaining because they won't make the changes that are necessary to really garner the benefits from philanthropy. Let me just tell you that philanthropy is elastic. And from an econometric sense, what that means is there is no fixed pie. And I know from personal experience on both sides of this equation, I work with nonprofits. I also work with high net worth individuals in philanthropy, that there is a great deal of money every single year that is simply left on the table by nonprofits because they do not know how to engage donors appropriately. And so they leave the money. They leave it sitting right there. And the only thing that is holding you back is your own self, your own approach. But you must be willing to make changes and adjustments where necessary, because simply doing the same thing is going to get you the same results. And this goes back to, fundraising and the board. Yes, fundraising is about asking. That's true. Notice the position of those hands, however. One isn't holding out his hand as though he's expecting some sort of handout. It's a partnership. And this is what organizations need to understand. They need to engage their donors as investors, because properly administered, when you solicit for a gift, you're actually offering something that's more valuable than what you're receiving. Yes, you really are, because you're giving donors the opportunity at personal self-fulfillment. Think about that for a minute, because that's more important to these people than their money. Money's involved, money's required, but that's not the object of this relationship. The object of the relationship, of a philanthropic relationship, is to engage the donor and to bring the donor to a place of self-fulfillment. And this requires organizations to sort of get outside of themselves and understand this. Now, in the for-profit world, there are organizations, there are market verticals, product market verticals that understand this fact very, very well. And they have used this value proposition that if you buy our product, you will be self-fulfilled extremely well. They make hundreds of billions of dollars with that very value proposition. But what they offer is really an imitation. What nonprofits can offer philanthropists is the real thing, if they're doing. But now asking is only one small part of fundraising. It's not even really the majority part in terms of time. Another thing that in fundraising that board members should be concerned about is making the connections between people. Here we are, it's networking. Whenever I think about the fact that everyone in the world is only 6 degrees of freedom away from each other, that's pretty staggering when you think about it. So in 6 degrees of freedom or less, you can access every single person who would support your organization by reason of either affinity or ability. You can do that. And you see, this is a place where putting your board together strategically is so very important. You want representatives from all of the major constituencies from which you plan to seek funds. I worked with a poverty relief agency once that covered a 5-county area out here in the West, and I was coaching them. And they were lamenting the fact that in this one particular county where they offered a great deal of service, they received no giving at all. So the first thing I asked them was, well, who on this board is a resident in that county? Not one. I said, well, then what can you expect? You need to have a reach out. You need to have that presence there. And then also board members are charged with actually evaluating an existing fundraising program. And evaluating means looking at the right variables. Cash in the last quarter is not a fundraising variable. That's an accounting statistic. It doesn't have any predictive value for fundraising whatsoever. They need to be focused on other things in terms of donor retention and gift size and numbers of conversions from income to assets. These kinds of things that will really show them where the program is performing and where it's going. And so board members need to be trained or brought to a level of education so that they know what they're looking at. And then at the same time, staff need to prepare a meaningful program, a meaningful plan that would be debated and to be approved each year so that it involves and gains ownership by the board at the same time. And then the other part of board fundraising responsibilities are sharing with others their own experiences. Now, when we talked about fundraising a few minutes ago, and I want to make sure I don't gloss over this, the example piece, the leading by example, the sharing piece, this is why it is so critical and absolutely mandatory that every board member make a financial investment from personal resources each year that is commensurate with their financial ability. You know, everyone doesn't have the same level of income or the same level of assets they can tap. So it's whatever is appropriate for them. I often hear, oh, but Mary gives her time. That's great, that's wonderful, but that is not enough. You must have that financial investment. Why? You know, typically, yes, board members are going to be giving substantial, healthy gifts, but it's more than the money. It's really the example. You simply will not be believable to other people. Even if they don't know you haven't given, it'll come across unless your board has made those gifts. It's absolutely critical. So, and the other piece about that I was going to talk about, one thing I was going to, the sharing, the piece, it'll come back to me, but I'm getting older, I guess. But so now my next question is, it's a question to all of you. How many people out there on the webinar today in any way feel like they're stuck, that they somehow have reached a challenge or an impasse that how can they do that? We don't want to say yes if they've reached sort of an impasse at this point. Some of you, most of you, any of you, just type yes into the box there. Oh yes. Okay. Well, you know, it goes back to what we've talked about earlier, and that is, you know, knowing the principles and working within them. How many of you out there would like to upgrade what you're currently doing? I like it. Amen. Great. Of course. Yes, totally. All right. Now, that does require change. That requires doing things differently or doing different things or both are the same. And how many of you out there would like to develop a healthier, stronger, sustainable, and I underscore that word, sustainable revenue stream? And here's why I say sustainable. There's lots of ways to raise money once and done. You can raise money a lot of money that way, but it's a once and done thing. It's not something that you can depend on year in and year out, and it scales over time. That's what I'm speaking of. I mean, you know, the what was it? The ice bucket challenge. That was quite the anomaly. It raised a lot of money over a very short period of time. It's not repeatable. You haven't seen anything like that lately, have you? No. That's why that kind of fundraising or that approach, crowdfunding, for instance, is very useful in a once and done need, like a natural disaster or something like that. So then, how do you build an organization like I've been speaking about? How do you do that? Well, you know, we talked about this again. Let's go back to it again. And that is, you start with not the process, not the paradigm, but the principles. You need to know the principles, and then from the principles, you begin to develop a paradigm that fits within those, that also defines your organization. And a paradigm consists of, you know, whether you have a membership base. In this case, you probably do if you're a Wild Apricot customer, or whether you have whether it's completely open or completely closed. What's the geographic area you're concerned with? All these kinds of details that will define sort of the structure or mental paradigm of your organization. And then once you've done that, you can begin to choose the kinds of fundraising process that would work for you. You know, and this, I caution you a lot on this, because, you know, every day in my email box, I get, well, I've had 25 this morning, new offers of new techniques and new technology and new ways to raise money. Well, they're probably all pretty good if they're used in the right way in the right place. But they're not universally applicable. They don't automatically give you the result that they're promoting. They only work if they're within your paradigm, number one, and number two, they only work if they're within the principle that governs that piece of the process. So we talked a minute earlier about those unchanging truths which govern philanthropy. And I call those the 8 principles of sustainable fundraising. Now, I didn't invent these. I didn't create them. I simply put names on them and I symboled them in one place. And once you see them as a whole, not as things that you pick off one at a time, then you come up with what I call the 8 principle mindset. And this is where you can approach your what now and your how because you know the why. That's the key. You've set the stage for unparalleled success. I can tell you, for instance, that most fundraising anxiety comes from lack of understanding of these principles and a dysfunctional view of money and how money operates. And so the principles, we talk about those. So I'd like to ask you, are any of you curious how you could achieve this mindset? All right. Well, Don teed me up earlier. He said that the 8 Principles provides digital training, and we do. And when I say digital, I mean completely online video, mobilely adaptive training that goes with you, and it's always there with you, 24/7 accessible, totally enclosed in a membership platform. That's what I'm talking about. And we're very pleased. This has been active for about 15 months, and we've been getting a lot of requests for letting people see this. And so what we've done is we have created a basic level or a freemium level of service for this platform. There we go, kind of slow. And the main platform is called the Oracle League. And you can go on our website, the8principles.com, and see the full Oracle League, the promotion for it. You can also go to the8principles.com and find the other products that we offer, the live workshops and the structured coaching, which is a little different than what you're used to. But this is something we're very proud of. This will give you, for it completely free, you can have it for forever. Once you sign up, it's yours. And it will show you the actual structure and some of the content of the full platform. There's a course each month, and there are about 5 lessons in each course. Every course gets 4 CFRE credits. There's a podcast of a practitioner that I interviewed that talks about how they do this. And then there's what I think is the best part is there's 1 hour open counsel call where I'm live on the line, and it's an audio call, and people call in from all over the world. Actually, we have someone even in Russia that does this. And ask about their particular issues in fundraising. And it's a great place to share with your peers as well as to ask me any questions that you have. And that's the full-blown Oracle League. And if you just go to Oracle Basic right now, at any time, you can sign up for the basic version of this, which will give you the first lesson of each course and a selection of podcasts that you can view. So I encourage you to try that out. And then, of course, if you really like what you see, the whole Oracle League is very economical. You'll see there are 3 ways to purchase it. And I hope you'll try it out. Let me know what you think. We're pretty proud of it, quite frankly. We're at about half after the hour, Donald. I want to open this up to open questions. We've covered a lot of area. I'm sure there are questions. I'm going to leave this screen up so people can go to Oracle Basic if they'd like to. And so can you unmute yourself, Donald, and let's have a little conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to encourage everyone to ask questions, because this is really where, you can get practical advice from Larry, things that you can, take away today and start to solve some of those, fundraising challenges. So, I mean, that's the point of having everyone here and having access to Larry and his expertise and all his experience. So, and we want to make sure that you do get your questions answered. And as we'll mention later, we're going to join and continue the conversation on Facebook. So please fire away. So, one question we've got here is from somebody who says they have a tough time getting their board members to fundraise. So how do they get their board members to play their part and to keep them motivated? So,
all right, let me address that. If you're dealing with existing board members that were enlisted without this firm understanding, you're pushing the boulder uphill. Some will be more cooperative than others. The solution to this issue is to be very deliberate and very strategic when you enlist new board members. That would include a written job description, which states very plainly that a gift is expected and attending board meetings is expected. Participation in the fundraising enterprise is expected. And then you use this as you work with the board enlistment process. Boards are very special people. Board members are very special people. You can have a wonderful volunteer who brings lots of skill, but for whatever reasons would not be a good board member. Board membership is not a reward; it's a responsibility. And when I was in higher education, one of the things that I had to do was to go out and vet potential board members for my president, and I would do all the background work and secure all the verbal commitments before the president and the board chair ever showed up to enlist this person. Because when the enlistment came, it was really quite a formality. We covered all the issues. And if a person, for whatever reason, wasn't able to commit the time, didn't feel they could commit the funds, whatever, that's as far as it went. And everyone's dignity was retained, and you didn't have to go any further. You do not help yourself, nor do you help others if you try to sidestep this in the interest of getting someone because of their name, or you're trying to fill a seat. That's not what this is about. This is about getting the right people on the bus, even if it's a small group. And let me give you an example of how this inverse sort of thing can really come back to bite you. I was working for a social relief agency, and I was talking to one of their employees one day. And I was there, coaching the development staff. And she told me the story about being invited to be on a board of a local charity. And this lady was Hispanic. And she sort of told me her tale of woe, that she'd been on this board 3 years. And that in this 3-year time, she really wanted to contribute and she really wanted to be a part. But that she had yet to be asked for a gift of any kind. None. Zip. And, she looked around the room and she knew that there was a lot of deep pockets around that room, a lot of leaders in the community. And, after a while, rightly or wrongly, she had concluded that she was there as some sort of token. And that's why she was there, just to fill a slot. And so she had decided to not continue after the end of the year. And that's really a shame. Now, my guess is, knowing my business and knowing human nature, that the other members of that board were probably too reluctant or felt it would be awkward to ask her for a gift. You see, nothing could be farther from the case. You see, people want to be asked if they really want to participate. So I encourage you that the most effective way to ask board members, of course, is what's called a peer ask. That's a face-to-face, one-on-one ask. Standing up in front of the group and saying, essentially, y'all give. That may work at some level, but it really doesn't engender the kind of commitment that you're looking for. So I hope that was a question. I mean, if you already got board members on there, you can coax them, you can guide them, you can give them small successes, but ultimately, if they were not enlisted with that as a part of their social contract, there's a limit to what you can do, because they would feel like it's a bait and switch, and rightly so. Donald, what else?
Yeah, we've got a great sort of flow of questions going here. So let me say, so here's one. My nonprofit does not have budget for paid staff, and thus the officers do almost all of the staff work. How do we get funding to hire staff so that board members can do their jobs and not be bogged down in admin and operations? So that's probably a very, very common problem.
All right, well, there are a couple ways of doing that. Now, I know that in the United States, there are some foundations, and I suspect there are in Canada as well, that will give you a one-time grant for developing fundraising capacity. A lot of organizations, in my view, squander this one-time grant because they'll take it and they'll use it to hire someone to write grants or hire someone to run events or whatever like that. And rather than hiring a development officer that would actually build your strategic program for you. That's one way. Another way would be to very carefully and very astutely plan in advance to build your capacity. And what I mean by that is, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Some of you may know the name Wendy Kopp. And Wendy Kopp was a young woman who, I guess now 20 years ago, it's getting on now, she founded an organization called Teach for America. Now, Wendy was a senior in college. She didn't have any money, but she had this idea about getting teachers or new graduates from colleges to teach in underperforming or inner city schools for a year. And she didn't, as I said, she brought no money to the table. But what she did do is she assembled a group of true believers that helped her first to assemble the initial infrastructure money. She did that before she ever placed one teacher into a situation. And what I'm trying to get at here is, nonprofit people are very well motivated to make a difference in other people's lives. And any strength taken to its natural conclusion becomes a weakness. And so their desire to be out there in the community making a big difference, running the tape further and further out when they don't have the infrastructure to support that, really comes back to bite them, because they've not really taken the opportunity and taken the time to build the capacity first. So let's pull this back into the question. And the question would be, and of course, I don't know your situation and I don't know the particulars, but I suspect, in fact, I know that if you were to regroup, pull back, and focus on getting support for infrastructure, that you would start with a stronger position rather than simply doing programming. And that's would be my advice to you. Donald?
Yeah, thank you, Larry. So here's a few questions here. So what would be the best approach to ask for the annual board contribution? Should it be the board chair, development director, or executive director?
Well, it's what I call a peer ask. First of all, it should not be the executive director or the development director, because the board is their boss. I mean, that's the employee asking the employer. That puts them in an awkward position, puts them in an inferior situation, and you don't want that. The most effective boards, the ones that are the healthiest, the ones that people are waiting in line to get on, so to speak, are the ones who have come together as a single unit that are unified by their purpose. And one of the ways this happens very effectively over just a 2 or 3 year period, it doesn't take long, is what's known as conducting a peer ask. And that's done, it's very simply, let's say you have 15 people on your board, as an example. Then you would take a small group, maybe 3 people of that 15, and with the executive director, you would meet and to begin to plan the annual campaign for board members. First thing you would do would be go down the list of every single board member and ask yourselves the question, what could Mary do if she were properly motivated? That's not what she will do, but what could she do? And you do this for every single board member, and then you have a suggested asking amount, a number you want them to consider, and that's key. You're asking them to consider this amount. You're not collecting a bill, you're not putting them to the wall. You're asking them to consider this, and then each of the 3 people are first solicited with each other, and then the executive director. That's very key. There again, if you haven't made your own gift, you're simply not going to be believable. And then one by one, you put yourself, these 3 people put themselves in front of each, they divide up the list, maybe 5 each, and they go and visit the board members individually in person and say, John, I'd really like you to consider a gift of X for the annual campaign. Now, a couple of other little details. First of all, this needs to be done at the beginning of your fiscal year. You want your board to, quote, set the pace. It's also a great way to promote other gifts when you say, our board is 100% on board and we raised X dollars. So how do you set a goal for your board that's doable but challenging? Well, boards that are committed, the usual guideline is that if you take all those asking amounts and you just add them up, you sum them, and then you take 70% of that total. That is your board. That's your goal for the year. And if you can get there or over, you've got a committed group of people. And the other thing is, when you solicit them for an annual gift, you don't have to have the money all right then, even though it's an annual gift. It can be an annual pledge, which means that it's paid anytime during that fiscal year. So therefore, they could pay it now, they could pay it at the end, they could pay it in installments, a much more comfortable way of giving. And if you're one of those organizations whose fiscal year straddles the tax years, that gives your donors and your board members even more flexibility. So that's how you do it when you do it effectively.
Just a clarifying question. Thanks, Larry. Someone said, did you say 70% of the goal or 7%?
70%. 70%. Now, obviously, if you're falling below that, you've got some commitment issues that need to be addressed. But that's the bar that's generally used. By the way, it's a similar process for employees. They need to be solicited as well, but they're usually solicited in groups. Again, face-to-face, but it's a group solicitation. And it's not for specific asking amounts. You're looking for participation there.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. And then I like these tough questions. What is one piece of advice you have for engaging with potential corporate donors? And I know it's sometimes a tough one to answer, but you are put on the spot for one. If you had to give one piece of advice.
All right. That's, first of all, we need to remember that corporate donors are still, you're still meeting with people and you're still meeting with individuals. It's still, humans are still involved. So at that point, at that level, things haven't really changed. You're not on a different planet. Now, the difference is that you're dealing in a corporate setting that makes decisions along established policies and guidelines. Individuals are a lot more flexible. They or may not be, thoroughly thought out what they want to do and how they want to do it. Business interests are very thought out in that regard. The one piece of advice I would give would be they have to remember that the corporation acts in its own self-interest. So you need to identify what the critical self-interest of the corporation is and attempt to match that with what you can offer them in exchange for a gift. There's the key. In some ways, it's the same way with individuals, but it's very formal in the amount of a corporation. Let me add one thing, which is sort of a sidestep to the corporate question. Almost without exception, the most generous group of individuals in any community will be business owners. Not corporate people on a salary, but business owners, equity owners in the business. Why is this the case? Well, they have their stake in the community. They're very mindful of the fact of what it takes to build something that's independent. And they're almost always very well motivated to give back to others. And so if I were in a community, I'd be focusing on business owners and to getting a cadre of those who really supported my cause.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. So is there, there's a lot of questions, so it's tough to choose. Hopefully we can get through many of them. And again, we want to be able to continue the conversation on Facebook. So if you don't get your questions answered, we can go there as well. But is there an ideal board size? It
depends a lot on the size of your organization, of course. Let me give you some guidelines. Once at certain size points, human groups change in terms of the way they interact with each other. Under 10, it's a very tight-knit, almost single-minded group. 10 to 20, you're getting more diversity of opinions and being able to bring skill sets to bear. Much beyond 25, it gets to be a little unwieldy, in the sense that unless you have, say, an independent foundation board, a fundraising foundation board, whose sole role is to raise money, and there are those that function that way, they're usually set up as separate charities adjacent to another kind of organization that needs that money, and so, but it's easier to organize that way. And in that case, if you're looking at a foundation board that their whole role is fundraising, then you're looking at 30, 40, 50 members. but then it takes a huge staffing commitment to make that work, because they have to be corralled and they have to be motivated and they have to be moved. If for my money, I would say for most organizations, anywhere from 15 to 25 is the ideal. 15, 16 often is a very workable number. It's not so much the size as it is everyone on that board must be 100% committed. And I'd take 4 people that are 100% committed over 35 that are there, half-heartedly. Because here's the key thing. Human groups form their own equilibrium. And if you have committed people, you will have lots of energy. If you have half committed and half committed, you're going to have an anchor. You're going to have the whole thing being dragged down. And as someone said to me once, significant people want to do significant things. And if you have non-performers on that board, they will lower the standards for everybody else.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Let's see. Here's a question. I am comfortable asking board members, but staff is a struggle for me. I know many could be making more elsewhere, and there's quite a bit of grunt work at our agency.
Well, I guess there's a question in there, and the question is, why would you do this? Well, there again, it goes back to what I said before. You're not looking for the amount here. The key is not how much money you're going to raise. It's you're looking for a commitment. I mean, some of you out there are probably poker players, and if you play the game, you know that to even sit at the table, regardless of what the stake level is, whether it's penny ante or if it's Monte Carlo level, whatever that level is, everyone who's sitting at that table needs to contribute to the blind. You have to have skin in the game. And that's why it's so important. And, I've seen it happen over and over and over again, where you start in an organization where you don't have a history of employee giving, and there's the same rationale given every time, the substandard salaries. It's very similar, very the same. And if it's approached in the right way, and leadership does it in the right way, meaning give themselves first, for instance, and it's not done in a way that's punitive, and it's done in these group settings that are face-to-face and there's follow-up, not only will you begin to bring people into the fold, you'll see employee morale actually go up. You'll see commitment to do your job actually go up, because you have this sense of commitment to the success of the organization. I have a client right now it's a major healthcare system that did not have a history of employee giving. And we this is like the second year now they've done that, and they started out the first year it had 20% give, and now they're up to 60% in 1 year, and morale has really improved dramatically. But it was the way it was approached. But I don't back off of that. I think it's not a question of, see, there again, it goes back to how you're feeling. I feel uncomfortable. Well, why is that? Probably because you think you're imposing on them in some way. I think you need to remember you're giving people an opportunity to participate, and making a case for why it's important that they participate. And if they decline, they decline. But you've given them the opportunity. The key is you're not putting anyone against the wall. You're not buttonholing them. They're not avoiding you when they see you. It's the approach.
Yeah, thank you for that, Larry. Let's maybe if we can squeeze in another couple of quick ones. So what metrics do you suggest for board use in evaluating fundraising?
A couple of very simple ones. First of all, you need to look at first-year retention rate, 3-year retention rate, and 5-year retention rate. You need to look at average gift size. You need to look at what I would call the couple of upgrade rates in terms of between 3-figure to 4-figure and 4-figure to 5-figure gifts. And then the most important one, and this is one that we talk about at the 8 Principles a great deal. This is where we talk about how you structure a program. In fact, there's one whole course where we devote to this, and that is understanding what most people would call a major gift. We don't use that term, and the reason we don't is because it's an artificial term. Major to one organization is minor to another one, and that's all based on gift size. The studies clearly show, whether it's a philanthropy enterprise or commercial enterprise, donor loyalty and donor commitment is based on emotional engagement. That's what it's based on. And so you want to be able to measure donor engagement. And one of the very easy ways to do that is when you can track, and it's easy to do this, when donors who are giving out of income start giving out of assets. And that can be a very simple asset. We're not talking about $1 million. It could be simply a payment out of a retirement account. Any sort of asset that's not income, you see, that's when you know that the donor is very connected with you and wants you to be successful, is committed to you being successful. And so you're looking for a higher proportion of what we call asset donors. And those, in our view at the A Principles, are the true major donors. They're the ones who will be with you through thick and thin. And typically they are the larger financial, donors, but not necessarily. But you're really looking for that conversion. So that's the board needs to review the plan in advance. They need to set financial goals that are in keeping with the capacity of the organization. Too often goal setting is a backward thing. Oh, well, we've got the budget, and so now we're going to make the goal meet the budget. That's baloney. I mean, it's like trying to, conduct go to the Indy 500 with a go-kart. You've got to have the right capacity to reach that level if you're going to do it. Simply willing it isn't going to make it happen. And so they need to be engaged in responsible goal setting as well. And this is where a professional development officer can be of great help. But the key is those are the basic things that the board should be asking. They should be reviewing every quarter. They should be looking at cash flow in terms of the curves every year. At what seasons do we get most of our money? How does it come in? How are we tracking from last year? These are the things. But last quarter's cash received, totally irrelevant from a fundraising point of view.
Well, thank you. And actually, I think I want to be respectful of everybody's time because I know we're snuggling up to the top of the hour, and I want to be able to deliver on get people over to Jason that have questions that might be specific to Wild Apricot. But thank you so very, very much, Larry. I'm grateful for the time, and I know that we are going to move the conversation over to Facebook. So any unanswered questions, please take them there. Jason will actually send the link to the Facebook group in the chat, and Larry, and I really loved how you talked about it's a lot to do with your own mental framing and your own mental approach. That's often sort of the things that hold us back from success, or how we project our own issues. So thank you so very much for enlightening us there and sharing your experience. I really appreciate that.
Well, ask Jason to put in my direct email. I'll gladly respond to anyone who wants to reach out to me. It's simply larry@the8principles.com. And if you put that in the box, and I'll certainly try to respond to the questions that come up on the Facebook account.
Great. Well, thank you so very much, Larry. I really, really appreciate that. And then I do want to remind everybody that we are going to share a recording of the webinar in a follow-up email that'll be in the next day or two. Again, reminder, if you are interested in asking more questions, the Facebook group there, link we've got from Jason. And I want to give everyone a chance, now that we're closing in on the top of the hour, a chance to inquire about Wild Apricot. We do have a 30-day free trial for anybody who's interested, and Jason's going to paste the link in there. And if you click on that link, you can enter your email, your name, and organization name, and you're ready to go on with your free trial.